A festival day dawns. You imagine waking before dawn, your heart already lifting, because today is not like other days. You lie still for a moment beneath your woolen blanket, the rough fibers familiar against your skin, and you listen. The roosters have not yet begun their crowing, but somewhere in the village, someone is already stirring. You hear the creak of a door, the soft thud of footsteps on packed earth, and then, faintly, the sound of laughter. It drifts through the cool morning air like a promise, and you remember. Today is the festival. Today, the ordinary rules do not apply. Today, there will be music and dancing and food you have dreamed about for weeks. Today, for a few precious hours, the weight of your daily labors will lift from your shoulders, and you will be free to simply enjoy being alive. You rise slowly, carefully, so as not to wake the others sleeping nearby. The single room you share with your family is dim, lit only by the faint gray light creeping through the cracks in the shutters. The fire has burned low overnight, reduced to glowing embers that pulse with a soft orange warmth. You can smell the ash, the lingering scent of last night's simple supper, and beneath it all, the earthy smell of the thatched roof and the packed dirt floor. These are the smells of home, as familiar to you as your own heartbeat. But today, even these ordinary things seem touched by something special. Today, the whole world feels different. You pull on your clothes, the same clothes you wear most days, patched and mended and softened by years of use. But today, you take a moment to smooth down the fabric, to tuck your hair beneath your cap with a little more care than usual. Perhaps you have a ribbon you have been saving, a small strip of colored cloth that you tie at your wrist or weave into your braid. It is a tiny thing, this ribbon, but it makes you feel festive. It marks this day as different from all the others. In a life where so much is dictated by necessity, these small choices matter more than anyone who has never lived this way could possibly understand. Outside, the village is beginning to wake. You step through the low doorway and into the cool morning air, and you pause for a moment to breathe it in. The sky is pale, the color of milk mixed with water, and the stars are fading one by one. The world is balanced on the edge between night and day, and there is something magical about this hour. Something that makes you feel as though anything might happen. The familiar shapes of the village surround you, the cottages huddled close together, the church steeple rising against the lightning sky, the well at the center of the square where you have drawn water 1,000 times. But today, even these ordinary sights seem transformed. Garlands of greenery have been hung from doorways. Ribbons flutter from posts. Somewhere, someone is setting up a trestle table, and you can hear the clatter of wooden boards being laid across supports. You are not wealthy. No one in this village is wealthy, not by the standards of the lords and ladies who live in their great stone manors beyond the hills. Your life is shaped by labor, by the endless cycle of planting and harvesting, of mending and making, of caring for animals and children and aging parents. Your hands are rough from work. Your back aches on cold mornings. You have known hunger and sickness and loss. But you have also known these moments of joy that bloom like wildflowers in the cracks of a hard life. And perhaps that is what makes them so precious. Perhaps that is why you have been counting the days until this festival. Why your heart lifts now at the sound of distant drums beginning to beat somewhere on the edge of the village. The drums grow louder as you walk toward the village square. Other people are emerging from their homes now, rubbing sleep from their eyes, calling greetings to one another. Children dart between the adults, too excited to walk at a normal pace, their laughter high and bright in the morning air. An old woman sits on a bench outside her cottage, her face creased with wrinkles, her eyes bright with memories of festivals past. She nods to you as you pass, and you nod back. Connected by this shared anticipation, this collective understanding that today is a gift, you pass the baker's cottage, and the smell that reaches you stops you in your tracks. Fresh bread, but not the coarse, dark bread you eat every day. Today, the baker has made something special, something enriched with precious eggs and a little honey, something that will be soft and sweet and utterly delicious. Your mouth waters, and you allow yourself to imagine the taste, to hold that anticipation like a warm coal in your chest. Later, you tell yourself. Later, there will be time for eating. For now, you simply walk and watch and let the excitement build. The square is filling with people now. You see faces you know, the blacksmith with his massive arms and gentle smile, the miller's wife with her brood of red-haired children, the young man from the farm on the hill, who always seems to find a reason to stand near you at gatherings like this. You see faces you do not recognize, to travelers who have come from neighboring villages, drawn by the promise of celebration. A festival like this is a rare thing, a convergence of community and calendar that brings people together from miles around. For a few hours, the boundaries between villages blur, and everyone is simply part of one great human gathering, united by the desire to celebrate near the well. A group of musicians is tuning their instruments. You see a man with a pipe, another with a small drum, a woman holding a stringed instrument you do not know the name of. The sounds they make are discordant now, each playing their own fragment of melody. But soon, you know, those fragments will weave together into something whole and beautiful. Soon, there will be music that makes your feet want to move and your heart want to sing. You find a spot at the edge of the square where you can see everything, and you settle in to wait. The sun is rising now, spilling golden light across the thatched rooftops, turning the dew on the grass to scattered diamonds. The sky has shifted from gray to pale blue, streaked with clouds that glow pink and orange at their edges. It is going to be a beautiful day. You can feel it in your bones, that particular lightness that comes when the weather and the occasion and your own mood all align perfectly. You take a deep breath and let it out slowly, feeling the tension of ordinary days begin to melt away. Around you, the village continues to prepare. Men are rolling barrels into position, and you know those barrels contain ale that has been brewing for weeks, waiting for exactly this moment. Women are carrying platters covered with cloths, hiding the treats beneath from eager eyes and hungrier fingers. Children are being scolded and praised and scolded again, their energy barely contained by their parents' attempts at discipline. Everyone has a role to play, a contribution to make, and yet there is no stress in this preparation, no anxiety. There is only the shared understanding that something wonderful is about to happen, and that everyone present will be part of it. You think about the lords and ladies in their great houses, with their silk clothes and their silver plates and their endless supplies of meat and wine. You wonder if they ever feel what you are feeling right now, this specific joy that comes from rarity, from knowing that today is special precisely because most days are not. You suspect they do not. You suspect that when every day is a feast, no day is truly a celebration. But for you, for everyone in this village, today is extraordinary. Today is a jewel set in the plain metal of ordinary life, and its brilliance is all the greater for the contrast. The drums are beating steadily now, a rhythm that seems to match your heartbeat, that seems to pulse through the ground beneath your feet. Someone has started singing a familiar song that everyone knows, and other voices are joining in, one by one, until the whole square is filled with music. You find yourself humming along, then singing softly, then singing louder, your voice blending with the voices of your neighbors, your friends, your community. This is what it means to belong. This is what it means to be human, to be part of something larger than yourself, to share in joy that is multiplied by sharing. The festival is beginning. The day stretches before you like a promise, full of unknown pleasures waiting to be discovered. You do not know exactly what will happen in the hours ahead, but you know it will be good. You know you will laugh and eat and dance and talk. You know you will make memories that will warm you through the cold months to come. And right now, in this perfect moment, that is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything. Let yourself sink into this feeling, this anticipation, this gentle excitement. Let the sounds of the village wash over you, the drums and the singing and the laughter of children. Let the golden light of the rising sun warm your face. You are here, in this moment, in this village, on this festival day, and everything is possible. The rhythm of work and rest, why fun mattered, but this festival did not appear from nowhere. It was part of a rhythm older than memory, a pattern woven into the very fabric of medieval life that might surprise you, if you have only heard stories of endless toil and suffering. The truth is more complex, more human, and in many ways more hopeful than the dark images that often come to mind when we think of this distant era. Yes, life was hard. Yes, work was constant and demanding. But rest was also sacred, and joy was not a luxury reserved for the wealthy. It was a necessity built into the calendar, protected by custom and even by the church itself. Consider the year as it unfolded for someone living in your village. It was not an unbroken stretch of labor from January to December. Instead, it was punctuated by feast days and holy days, by celebrations that marked the turning of the seasons and the stories of the saints. Some historians estimate that medieval peasants might have had as many as 100 days of rest per year, not counting Sundays. 100 days. That is more than many modern workers enjoy. With their 2 weeks of vacation and their exhausted weekends spent catching up on chores, the medieval calendar, for all its hardships, understood something that we have perhaps forgotten, that human beings cannot work endlessly without breaking, that rest is not laziness but renewal. These days of rest were not arbitrary. They were tied to the church calendar, which governed every aspect of medieval life. Each saint had a feast day, and the major saints had celebrations that could last for several days. Christmas was not a single day but a season stretching from late December into January. Easter brought its own extended celebration. There were days to honor the Virgin Mary, days to commemorate martyrs and apostles, days to mark the changing of the seasons with rituals that blended Christian practice with older traditions stretching back to times before memory. Each of these days was an opportunity to set aside the plow and the loom, to gather with neighbors, to remember that life was about more than mere survival. The church had its reasons for mandating rest, of course. These were days for prayer and reflection, for attending Mass and contemplating the divine. But the church was also practical, and the priests who served rural villages understood that their parishioners needed more than spiritual sustenance. They needed laughter and companionship and the simple pleasure of a day without obligations. And so the feast days became occasions for both sacred and secular celebration, for morning masses followed by afternoon games, for prayers and then dancing, for the soul and then the body. You would have grown up knowing this rhythm in your bones. As a child, you would have learned to anticipate the great festivals, to count the days until Christmas or Midsummer or the feast of your village's patron saint. These were the landmarks of your year, the bright spots that broke up the long stretches of ordinary time. You would have known which festivals meant special foods, which meant traveling performers might pass through, which meant you could stay up late listening to stories by the fire. This knowledge would have been part of you, as natural as breathing, as essential as knowing when to plant and when to harvest. But the rhythm of rest was not only about the great festivals. It was also woven into the fabric of ordinary weeks. Sunday was a day of rest, mandated by both church and custom, a day when even the most demanding lord could not require his peasants to work. You would have attended Mass in the morning, standing in the cool stone church with your neighbors, listening to prayers in Latin that you might not fully understand, but that nonetheless connected you to something vast and eternal. And then the rest of the day would have been yours, to spend as you wished, to visit with family, to play games with friends, to simply sit and rest your weary body. There were other pauses built into the week as well. Saturday afternoons were often free, a half day of rest that allowed you to prepare for Sunday and to tend to your own needs. Some feast days fell in the middle of the week, creating unexpected breaks in the routine of labor. And there were seasonal rhythms, too, times of year when the work was lighter and there was more time for leisure. The deep winter months, when the fields lay fallow and the days were short, offered opportunities for gathering around the fire, for telling stories and playing games and simply being together. This might seem strange to modern ears, accustomed as we are to thinking of the medieval period as an age of unrelenting hardship. We imagine peasants bent over their work from dawn to dusk every day, with no relief and no joy. But this image is incomplete. It fails to account for the way medieval society understood time, the way rest was valued not as a reward for productivity, but as a fundamental human need. It fails to account for the wisdom of a culture that recognized, however imperfectly, that people are not machines, that we need beauty and celebration and connection as surely as we need bread and shelter. Of course, this is not to say that medieval life was easy. It was not. The work was backbreaking, the living conditions were often harsh, and the specter of famine and disease was never far away. But within these constraints, people found ways to carve out moments of joy. They found ways to celebrate, to laugh, to play. They understood that fun was not frivolous but essential, that the festivals and games and gatherings were what made the hard times bearable. Without these bright spots, the darkness would have been overwhelming. With them, life became something worth living. Think about what this meant for someone like you, living in that village, wearing those rough clothes, eating that simple food. It meant that no matter how hard the past weeks had been, there was always another festival on the horizon. It meant that you had something to look forward to, something to anticipate, something that gave shape and meaning to the passage of time. It meant that you were not alone in your labors, that your whole community shared both the work and the rest, that joy was a collective experience rather than a private luxury. This is what the rhythm of work and rest really meant. It was not just about taking breaks. It was about creating a life that had texture and variety, that moved between effort and ease, that honored both the necessity of labor and the necessity of joy. It was about building a society that understood something profound about human nature, something that we are perhaps only now beginning to rediscover in our modern world of burnout and exhaustion and endless productivity. As you stand in the village square on this festival morning, surrounded by your neighbors, listening to the drums, you are participating in something ancient. You are part of a tradition that stretches back through countless generations. A tradition that says yes, work hard, but also rest well. A tradition that says joy is not a distraction from real life, but an essential part of it. A tradition that understands, deep in its bones, that human beings need celebration as surely as they need food and water and air. If you are enjoying this journey into the past, consider subscribing so we can walk through history together again soon. There is so much more to discover, so many more moments of joy and sorrow and wonder waiting to be explored. But for now, let yourself rest in this understanding, this gentle revelation that our ancestors, for all their hardships, knew how to celebrate. They knew how to rest. They knew how to find joy in the cracks of a difficult life. And perhaps, in remembering this, we can learn something valuable for our own lives, our own struggles, our own search for balance and meaning. The drums are still beating, the sun is still rising, and the festival is only beginning. Let yourself drift deeper into this world, this village, this moment. Let the rhythm of work and rest carry you forward into the heart of medieval celebration, into the simple and profound pleasures that awaited those who lived so long ago. They were not so different from us, these ancestors of ours. They laughed and loved and played just as we do, and their laughter, though silent now, echoes still in the traditions we have inherited, in the holidays we still celebrate, in the fundamental human need for joy that connects us across the centuries. Games of skill and chance playing in the village, and when those precious free hours arrived, what did people actually do? Let us sit among them and see. Let us walk together into the heart of the village, where the games are beginning, where shouts of encouragement and groans of defeat, where for a few hours the serious business of survival gives way to the equally serious business of play. Get you. Make your way through the gathering crowd, clearing at the edge of the square where a group of men has assembled. They are young and old, farmers and craftsmen, their faces flushed with excitement, their sleeves rolled up despite the morning chill. In the center of the group, one man is hefting a wooden ball, testing its weight in his calloused palm. This is bowling, or something very like it, a game that has been played in villages like this one for longer than anyone can remember. The rules are simple. You roll the ball toward a target, trying to knock down wooden pins arranged at the far end of the clearing. Simple, yes, but that does not mean easy. Skill matters here. The subtle twist of the wrist, the careful aim, the ability to read the uneven ground and adjust accordingly. You watch as the first man takes his turn, winding up his arm and releasing the ball with a grunt of effort. It rolls along the packed earth, curving slightly to the left, and strikes the pins with a satisfying clatter. Some fall, others wobble, but remain standing. The crowd cheers and jeers in equal measure, and the man steps back with a rueful grin, already calculating what he might have done differently. Another man steps forward to take his turn, and the game continues, each player adding their own style and skill to the contest. But bowling is only one of many games that occupy the villagers on days like this. Nearby, you notice a smaller group gathered around a flat stone, their heads bent together in concentration. As you draw closer, you see what holds their attention. A board scratched into the surface of the stone, marked with lines and circles, with small pebbles and carved wooden pieces arranged in careful patterns. This is Nine Men's Morris, a game of strategy as old as the Roman occupation, perhaps older still. Two players face each other, taking turns placing and moving their pieces, trying to form rows of three while blocking their opponent from doing the same. It is a game that requires thought and patience, the ability to see several moves ahead, to anticipate your opponent's strategy while hiding your own. You watch for a while, fascinated by the quiet intensity of the players. These are not wealthy men with time to spare for idle pursuits. These are farmers and laborers, men whose days are filled with physical work that leaves little room for intellectual challenge. And yet here they are, minds sharp and focused, engaged in a battle of wits that is every bit as demanding as the battles of strength happening elsewhere in the village. Perhaps this is part of what makes games so important. They offer something different, a chance to use parts of yourself that ordinary life leaves dormant, to discover abilities you did not know you possessed. Elsewhere in the village, the games are rougher, louder, more physical. You hear them before you see them, a great roaring cheer that rises from beyond the church, followed by the thunder of running feet. You make your way toward the sound and find yourself on the edge of a scene of cheerful chaos. Two teams of young men are chasing a leather ball across an open field, kicking and shoving, and sometimes simply carrying it toward goals marked by posts at either end. This is football, though it bears little resemblance to the organized sport we know today. There are no fixed rules, or rather, the rules vary from village to village, from game to game, negotiated on the spot and enforced by nothing more than collective agreement and the threat of a well-aimed elbow. The game is rough. You wince as two players collide with a meaty thud, tumbling to the ground in a tangle of limbs. But they rise, laughing, brushing dirt from their clothes, and throw themselves back into the fray. There is something primal about this contest, something that speaks to deep human needs for competition and belonging, and the simple, physical joy of running and fighting and testing yourself against others. The spectators shout encouragement to their favorites, insults to the opposition, predictions that prove wildly inaccurate as the ball changes possession again and again. Watching from the sidelines, you feel your own heart racing, caught up in the excitement despite yourself. You notice that the players are not all young men. There are older players too, veterans of countless games, their movements slower but their cunning greater. And on the edges of the field, children are playing their own miniature version of the game, learning the skills and the camaraderie that will serve them when they are old enough to join the main contest. This is how traditions are passed down, not through formal instruction, but through participation, through watching and imitating and gradually becoming part of something larger than yourself. Not all games are so physical, of course. As the morning wears on, you find yourself drawn to a quieter corner of the village, where a different kind of play is taking place. Here, a group of men and women sit in a loose circle, passing small objects from hand to hand, their eyes bright with a particular kind of intensity. These are the gamblers, and what they hold in their hands are dice, small cubes of bone or wood, carved and marked, instruments of fortune that can bring sudden wealth or sudden ruin. Gambling is common in medieval villages. Despite the church's frequent condemnations, there is something irresistible about the promise of chance, the possibility that a single throw might change your circumstances, might transform an ordinary day into something extraordinary. The stakes here are modest: a few coins, a tool, a promised favor. But the emotions are anything but modest. You watch as dice are thrown, as faces light up with triumph or fall with disappointment, as the wheel of fortune spins and spins and spins. But gambling is not merely about greed or the hope of gain. It is also about community, about shared risk and shared excitement, about the leveling power of chance that makes a poor man equal to a rich one for the duration of a game. When the dice are in the air, no one knows what will happen next. Status and wealth and all the careful hierarchies of medieval society are suspended, replaced by the pure democracy of luck. Perhaps this is why the church objects so strongly. And perhaps this is why the people persist in playing despite those objections. There is freedom in these small wooden cubes, a momentary escape from the fixed order of things. As the sun climbs higher, you wander from game to game, sampling the pleasures of each. You try your hand at knucklebones, tossing small animal bones into the air and trying to catch them on the back of your hand. A game of dexterity that children and adults alike enjoy. You watch a game of quoits, iron rings thrown at a stake driven into the ground, the clang of metal on metal ringing out across the square. You see children playing hoodman blind, what we might call blind man's buff. One child blindfolded, while others dance around just out of reach, giggling and shrieking with delight. Each game has its own rhythm, its own pleasures, its own community of players and spectators. And yet there is something that unites them all, a common thread that runs through every contest of skill and chance. It is the simple human joy of play, the fundamental need to engage with the world in ways that are not purely practical, to test ourselves and challenge ourselves, and sometimes simply to have fun. This need does not belong to any particular era or class. It belongs to everyone, to all of us, stretching back through time to the very beginnings of human society. You find a quiet spot at the edge of the square and sit for a moment, letting the sounds of play wash over you. Shouts and laughter, the clatter of bowling pins, the thud of the football, the rattle of dice in wooden cups. These are the sounds of joy, of community, of life being lived fully and vigorously. These are the sounds of people who have worked hard and who have earned this rest, who are making the most of these precious hours before the demands of ordinary life reclaim them. And perhaps, as you listen, you begin to understand something important about our medieval ancestors. They were not so different from us in their need for play. They sought out challenges and competitions. They took risks and celebrated victories. They lost gracefully or ungracefully and came back to try again. They understood, as we understand, that games are more than mere diversion. They are a fundamental expression of what it means to be human, a way of connecting with others, of testing ourselves, of finding joy in the simple act of playing. And this understanding, this shared humanity, bridges the centuries that separate us from them, making them feel close, making them feel real, making them feel like family. Music, dance, and storytelling, the sound of joy, but not all joy required competition. Sometimes it only required a voice, a drum, and willing feet. As the afternoon sun begins its slow descent toward the western hills, the games give way to something different, something that speaks to another part of the human spirit. The music is starting, and you feel its pull like a tide, drawing you toward the center of the village, where a transformation is taking place. The musicians you noticed earlier have found their rhythm now. The discordant tuning sounds have resolved into something coherent and beautiful, a melody that winds through the air like smoke from a hearth fire. The pipe player leads, his fingers dancing over the holes in his instrument, producing notes that are clear and bright and surprisingly complex. The drummer provides the heartbeat, a steady pulse that you feel in your chest before you hear it with your ears. And the woman with the stringed instrument, which you now recognize as something like a rebec, adds a layer of sweetness, a singing quality that makes the melody feel alive. You are not the only one drawn by the music. The square is filling with people, their games abandoned, their conversations trailing off as they turn toward the source of this irresistible sound. You see faces softening, shoulders relaxing, feet beginning to tap almost involuntarily against the packed earth. Music has this power, this ability to bypass the thinking mind and speak directly to something deeper, something that responds before you even know you are responding. It is one of the oldest human technologies, older than writing, older than agriculture, perhaps older than language itself. The first dancers emerge from the crowd, young women who have been waiting for this moment, who have practiced their steps in secret, who are eager to show what they can do. They link hands and begin to move in a circle around the musicians, their feet tracing patterns that are both simple and elegant. Step, step, hop, step, step, hop. The basic pattern repeats, but within it there is room for flourishes, for individual style, for the expression of personality that makes each dancer unique even as they move together. More dancers join the circle, and then more still, until the movement encompasses dozens of people, young and old, male and female, linked together by clasped hands and shared rhythm. You feel someone take your hand, pulling you gently into the circle. And before you can think or protest, you are dancing to your feet, your body remembering movements you did not know you knew. This is the magic of communal dance. It is not about individual skill or performance. It is about belonging, about being part of something larger, about feeling the pulse of the community in your own pulse. The music shifts, speeds up, and the dance changes with it. Now the circle breaks into pairs, couples spinning and weaving through each other in patterns that seem chaotic but resolve somehow into order. You find yourself face to face with a partner, your hands clasped, your eyes meeting for a moment of connection before the dance spins you apart and brings you together with someone new. Each exchange is brief but complete, a tiny relationship that forms and ends and leaves something behind. A warmth, a recognition, a sense of shared experience. Around the edges of the dancing, others watch and clap and sing along with the familiar tunes. An old man taps his foot with evident pleasure, his dancing days perhaps behind him, but his love of music undiminished. Children weave between the adults, not quite dancing, not quite playing, occupying that liminal space that belongs only to childhood. A young mother sways with an infant in her arms, humming softly, introducing her child to the rhythms that will shape their life. And then, as the sun sinks lower and the light turns golden, the music slows. The dancing continues, but it is different now, gentler, more intimate. Couples who earlier spun wildly through the crowd now hold each other close, moving together with a tenderness that requires no words. This is the other side of dance, not the exuberant communal celebration, but the quiet personal connection. The excuse to hold someone, to be held, to feel another heartbeat close to your own. When the dancing finally pauses, when the musicians set down their instruments to rest their fingers and wet their throats, a new entertainment emerges to fill the space. From somewhere in the crowd, a voice begins to speak, and the voice carries such authority, such practiced skill, that the chattering crowd falls silent almost instantly. It is a storyteller, a traveling performer who has timed her arrival to coincide with the festival. Knowing that today there will be an audience eager for her art, she is not young. This storyteller and her face bears the lines of countless journeys, countless performances, countless nights spent in strange villages far from home. But her voice is strong and supple, capable of dropping to a whisper that makes you lean forward to hear, or rising to a roar that makes you flinch in your seat. She has spent her life mastering this voice, shaping it into an instrument as precise and expressive as any musician's pipe or drum. She begins with a story you have heard before, a tale of heroes and monsters, of quests and trials, of good triumphing over evil after great struggle and sacrifice. But even though you know how it ends, you find yourself caught up in the telling as if hearing it for the first time. This is the storyteller's gift, to make the familiar feel fresh, to invest old words with new life, to create a world with nothing more than voice and gesture and the willing imagination of her audience. You watch the faces around you as the story unfolds. You see children with their mouths hanging open, completely transported to the world of the tale. You see adults nodding at familiar passages, their lips moving silently along with words they learned in their own childhood. You see the very old, whose eyes have gone distant with memory, perhaps recalling the first time they heard this story, perhaps thinking of all the years between then and now. Stories connect us in this way, not just to each other, but to all the generations that came before. All the voices that have told these same tales around countless fires stretching back into the mists of time. The story ends, as all stories must, and the crowd sighs with satisfaction. There is applause, coins tossed into the storyteller's upturned hat, and then requests for another tale, and then another. The storyteller obliges, shifting between registers, from heroic epic to bawdy comedy to gentle romance. She knows her audience, knows what they need, knows how to give them exactly enough of each flavor to keep them hungry for more. As darkness begins to fall, fires are lit around the square, and the storytelling continues by firelight. The flames cast dancing shadows on the faces of the listeners, making them look like characters in their own story, like figures from a dream or a legend. The storyteller's voice weaves through the crackling of the fire, and you feel yourself drifting, not asleep, not quite, but somewhere in between, a twilight state where the boundary between the story and your own life grows thin. What songs do you think have been lost to time? What stories were told around fires like this one that no one will ever hear again? The thought is melancholy, but also beautiful. A reminder of how much has been forgotten, how much has slipped through the cracks of history. And yet, here you are, listening to stories that have survived, songs that have been passed down through generations, melodies that still echo in the music we make today. Something has been preserved, even if much has been lost. Something connects us still to those ancient voices, those distant fires, those long-ago nights of music and storytelling. If you have thoughts, leave them in the comments. I would love to hear what you wonder about, what stories you wish had survived, what songs you imagine might have filled the air on nights like this one. There is something powerful about sharing these wonderings, about building a community of people who care about the past, who want to understand how our ancestors lived and loved and found joy in a world so different from our own. The fire burns lower. The storyteller's voice grows soft. Around you, people are beginning to drift away, carrying the stories with them, holding them like treasures to be examined again in quiet moments. But the night is not over yet. There is still food to eat, still conversations to have, still quiet moments to steal with those you love. The festival continues, even as the music fades, even as the stories end, even as the flames die down to embers. You stay a little longer, watching the fire, listening to the murmur of voices, feeling the warmth of the community around you. This is what it meant to be alive in medieval times, not just the hard work and the hardship, but this, the music and the dancing and the stories. This is what made life worth living, what made the hard times bearable, what gave meaning and beauty and joy to ordinary existence. And perhaps, in some way, this is what still makes life worth living, what we still seek in our own music and dancing and stories. The same human needs expressed in different forms across the centuries. Feasts and food, the taste of celebration and, after the dancing, when your legs grew tired and your cheeks ached from laughter, there was the table waiting. In a world where hunger was never far away, where the next meal was never guaranteed, food took on a significance that we, with our overflowing supermarkets and on-demand delivery, can scarcely imagine. To eat well was not just to satisfy the body. It was to celebrate survival itself, to acknowledge with every bite that today, at least, there was enough. The trestle tables that were set up this morning are now laden with dishes that make your mouth water and your heart swell with anticipation. You approach slowly, almost reverently, taking in the sight and smell of foods that you rarely see on ordinary days. There is bread, yes, but not the coarse, dark bread. This is festival bread, made with finer flour, enriched with eggs, perhaps sweetened with precious honey from the village beekeeper. It is soft and golden, and when you tear off a piece and bring it to your mouth, you close your eyes to better savor the taste. Beside the bread are dishes of meat, another rarity, another cause for celebration. On ordinary days, your meals are centered around grains and vegetables, with meat appearing only occasionally and in small quantities. But today, there are whole roasted chickens, joints of pork glistening with fat, pies filled with minced meat and herbs and savory spices. The smell alone is intoxicating, rich and complex, speaking of hours of preparation and care. You take a portion and find a place to sit, joining the communal meal that is one of the festival's greatest pleasures around you. Others are eating with the same appreciative intensity. You see a man biting into a chicken leg with evident bliss, grease running down his chin, his eyes half closed in pleasure. You see children being scolded for reaching for seconds before they have finished firsts, their small hands darting toward the platters with an urgency that speaks to how rarely such abundance appears in their lives. You see old women chewing slowly, carefully, making each bite last, knowing from long experience how quickly plenty can turn to scarcity. The meat is not the only protein on offer. There are eggs, prepared in various ways, boiled and fried and baked into savory custards. There are cheeses, aged and fresh, soft and hard, some local and some brought from farther afield. There is fish for those who prefer it, or for those observing religious restrictions that forbid meat on certain days. The variety is staggering, at least by the standards of ordinary village life, and you find yourself wanting to try everything, to taste every dish, to store up these flavors against the lean times that you know will come again. But the savory dishes are only half the story. The other half is sweet, and it draws your eye with an almost magnetic force. There are pastries made with butter and sugar, filled with fruit preserves or sweet cheese. There are honey cakes, dense and sticky, flavored with spices that tingle on your tongue. There are baked apples, stuffed with dried fruits and nuts, soft and fragrant and impossibly delicious. Sugar is expensive. Honey is precious. And yet today, for this one day, they have been used with something approaching extravagance. You select a small honey cake and bite into it, and the sweetness floods your mouth like a revelation. You think of all the days when your meals consisted of nothing but porridge and bread, day after day, week after week, and you understand why this moment feels so important. This is not just eating. This is celebration made tangible, joy you can taste, abundance you can hold in your hands and consume and make part of yourself. The ale flows freely today as well. Wooden cups are filled and refilled, passed from hand to hand with toasts and blessings and good-natured jokes. The ale is not strong by modern standards, but it is flavorful and refreshing, and after a cup or two you feel a pleasant warmth spreading through your limbs, loosening your tongue, making the world seem softer and kinder than usual. This is the purpose of festival ale, not to intoxicate but to relax, to lower the barriers between people, to facilitate the communion that is at the heart of celebration. You notice how the eating brings people together in ways that even the dancing and the games did not quite achieve. There is something about sharing food that creates bonds, that acknowledges a fundamental equality among all who eat from the same table. The lord of the manor is not here, not at this village table, but if he were, the food would make him equal to the poorest peasant for the duration of the meal. Hunger is universal. Satisfaction is universal. The pleasures of the tongue cross all boundaries of class and status as the meal progresses. Conversation flows as freely as the ale. You find yourself talking with neighbors you rarely have time to speak with, learning about their lives, their hopes, their worries. There is gossip, of course, the currency of any small community. Stories about who said what to whom, who was seen with whom, whose cow has been sick, and whose daughter is being courted. But there is also deeper conversation. Discussions about the harvest, predictions about the weather, memories of festivals past, and speculation about festivals future. An old man at your table begins to talk about the feast he attended in his youth, when the lord of the manor provided a whole ox to be roasted in the village square. His eyes grow distant with memory, and his voice takes on a wistful quality as he describes the sight and smell of that massive animal turning slowly over the fire. The meat eventually carved and distributed to everyone present, even the poorest of the poor. It was a gesture of generosity that he has never forgotten, a moment of genuine community that transcended the usual divisions of medieval society. You listen, and you wonder what memories you will carry from this day, what stories you will tell when you are old and your grandchildren gather around to hear about the way things used to be. Perhaps you will tell them about the honey cakes, about how sweet they tasted, about how you closed your eyes and let the flavor transport you to a place of pure contentment. Perhaps you will tell them about the company, about the faces gathered around the table, about the laughter and conversation that made the food taste even better than it already was. The sun has set now, and the feast continues by firelight and candlelight. The pace of eating has slowed, but no one seems ready to leave the table. There is something comforting about being here, surrounded by others, bellies full, hearts light. The hard work of ordinary days feels very far away, a problem for tomorrow, not for now. Now there is only this moment, this food, this fellowship. Children begin to droop, their earlier energy expended, their small bodies heavy with food and fatigue. Parents gather them up, making their excuses, carrying their sleeping burdens toward home. But others stay, the young and the restless, the old and the nostalgic, those who want to hold on to this night as long as possible before it slips away into memory. You stay, too. You take another small portion of food, more for the pleasure of tasting than from any real hunger. You sip your ale and watch the fire, and let the conversation wash over you like warm water. This is contentment, you realize. This is what it feels like to have enough, to be surrounded by community, to be alive on a festival night in a medieval village. It is not a complicated feeling, but it is profound. It touches something deep and essential, something that all the progress of the centuries since has not changed. Eventually, you know, you will have to leave this table. You will have to go home to your small house, sleep in your simple bed, wake tomorrow to the resumption of ordinary life. But that is tomorrow. Tonight, there is still food on the table, and ale in the cups, and warmth in the air. Tonight, the feast continues, and you are part of it, and that is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything. Spectacles and mischief, mystery plays, fairs, and foolishness, but sometimes the world came to you. On certain days, the ordinary village transformed into something almost magical. A stage for wonders that broke the rhythm of familiar life and opened windows onto worlds beyond your daily experience. These were the days of spectacles, of performances and fairs, of sanctioned mischief and joyful chaos. And if the quiet pleasures of food and music fed the soul gently, these louder entertainments fed it with fire. The first sign that something extraordinary is happening comes with the sound of drums. Different from the festival drums you heard this morning, these drums are louder, more insistent, accompanied by the blare of a horn that seems to announce the arrival of something important. You follow the sound, along with dozens of your neighbors, until you reach the village green where a group of strangers has assembled. They are colorful, these strangers, dressed in clothes more vivid than anything you see in ordinary life. Greens and reds and yellows that catch the eye and hold it. These are players, traveling performers who move from village to village, from fair to fair, bringing entertainment to communities that have none of their own. They have set up a simple stage, nothing more than wooden planks laid across barrels, but it serves its purpose. It creates a space that is separate from ordinary life, a space where anything might happen, where the rules of the everyday world do not quite apply. You find a spot with a good view and settle in to watch. The play they perform is a mystery play, one of the great religious dramas that tell the stories of the Bible in terms that ordinary people can understand. The actors take on the roles of biblical figures, of prophets and saints, of devils and angels. They speak in verse that is sometimes beautiful and sometimes crude, mixing the sacred with the profane in ways that would shock us today, but that feel perfectly natural to their audience. The humor is broad, the emotions are big, and the message is clear. Good triumphs over evil. Faith is rewarded. Sinners are punished. You watch, transfixed, as the story unfolds. You see Noah building his ark while his wife complains loudly about the inconvenience. You see the devil tempting Christ with exaggerated gestures and a wicked grin. You see the crucifixion rendered with a pathos that brings tears to the eyes of the women around you. These are not subtle performances. They are not meant to be. They are meant to reach the heart directly, to bypass the mind's defenses and plant their seeds of faith and fear and hope in the fertile soil of emotion. When the play ends, the applause is thunderous. Coins are thrown onto the stage, gifts are offered, the players are treated as honored guests. They have brought something precious to this village, a glimpse of a world beyond the horizon, a story that connects this small community to the grand narrative of Christian history. For a few hours, the villagers have been transported, lifted out of their ordinary lives, and set down in the midst of events that shaped the world. But mystery plays are not the only spectacles that visit the village. On other days, there are fairs, great gatherings that transform the quiet village square into a cacophony of sights and sounds and smells. Merchants come from far away, bringing goods that the villagers have never seen, fabrics and spices and trinkets that seem almost magical in their strangeness. Entertainers of every kind compete for attention. Jugglers tossing balls and knives, acrobats tumbling through the air, animal trainers showing off their exotic charges. You wander through the fair with eyes wide, trying to take in everything at once. A man is swallowing fire, drawing it into his mouth and breathing it out again in great plumes of flame. A woman is dancing on a rope stretched between two poles, her balance so perfect that she seems to float. A group of children clusters around a puppet show, shrieking with laughter at the antics of the tiny figures that battle and embrace and speak in squeaky voices. There are darker entertainments too, amusements that remind us that medieval fun did not always align with modern sensibilities. Animal baiting drew crowds who watched dogs fight bears or bulls, cheering for blood and triumph. Public punishments were treated as spectacles, crowds gathering to mock those placed in stocks or worse. These were not aberrations but mainstream entertainments, accepted and even celebrated by the society of the time. We can acknowledge this honestly without dwelling on it, recognizing that every era has its blind spots, its cruelties that seem normal to those within it. But let us return to the lighter side of medieval mischief, to the sanctioned chaos that was perhaps the most surprising feature of medieval fun. On certain days of the year, the normal order of society was deliberately inverted. A lord of misrule was chosen, often a commoner, to preside over festivities in which the usual hierarchies were mocked and subverted. Masters served servants, the poor dressed as the rich, sacred things were treated with irreverent humor. It was carnival in the truest sense, a turning upside down of the world. This inversion served a purpose beyond mere entertainment. By allowing periodic releases of the tensions that built up in a rigidly hierarchical society, these festivals of misrule actually helped to maintain the social order. They were safety valves, controlled explosions that prevented larger, more dangerous eruptions. The lord who was mocked during carnival was the same lord who wielded absolute power the rest of the year. The mockery made his power bearable, gave the powerless a moment of imagined freedom, and ultimately reinforced the structures it seemed to subvert. A man has been chosen to play the fool, dressed in motley, carrying a pig's bladder on a stick which he uses to bop people on the head. He is allowed to say things that would normally be forbidden, to mock the village elders, to make jokes about the priest's belly or the reeve's notorious stinginess. Everyone laughs, including those being mocked, because today the rules are different. Today the fool is king. If you are still with me, drifting somewhere between waking and sleep, thank you for being here. A like or subscribe helps others find these quiet journeys into the past. And perhaps, as you rest, you can let your mind wander to those festival days of your own life, those times when the normal rules were suspended, when you felt free to be someone other than your everyday self. We all need these moments of misrule, these breaks from the structures that normally contain us. Our ancestors understood this deeply and built it into their calendar. The fair is winding down now. The players packing up their stage, the merchants counting their coins, the entertainers moving on to the next village, the next audience. But the memory of what you have seen stays with you, bright and vivid against the backdrop of ordinary life. You will talk about this fair for months to come, comparing notes with neighbors, retelling the best moments, already anticipating the next time the world comes to your village. They have reminded you that the world is larger than your village, more varied than your daily routine, full of wonders and dangers and marvels that you may never see firsthand, but that exist nonetheless. This knowledge is its own kind of wealth, a treasury of imagination that enriches even the poorest life. And perhaps this is why spectacles mattered so much to medieval people, why they traveled miles to see a play or a fair, why they remembered these events for years afterward. In a world bounded by the horizon, spectacles offered glimpses of infinity. Quiet pleasures, solitude, and simple joys, but not all joy was found in crowds. Sometimes the sweetest moments were the quiet ones, stolen from the demands of daily life, held close like secret treasures. After the noise and bustle of the festival, after the games and the dancing and the feasting and the spectacles, there were other pleasures, gentler ones, that spoke to a different part of the soul. Let us step away from the village square for a while and explore these quieter corners of medieval life. Imagine a summer afternoon, one of those rare hours when your work is done and no one needs you, when the long light stretches across the fields and time seems to slow to a crawl. You walk away from the village, following a path you know well, until you reach a spot by the river where the willows hang low over the water and the air is cool and green. You have brought your fishing line with you, a simple thing, just a length of cord with a hook tied to the end. You bait the hook with a worm you dug from the garden this morning, and you cast it into the slow-moving water, and then you sit. This is fishing, but it is also something more. It is solitude, a condition that was rare and precious in medieval life. Your days are normally filled with people, with family and neighbors, and the constant awareness of community that came from living in small houses, in small villages, where everyone knew everyone else's business. Privacy, as we understand it, barely existed. To be alone, truly alone, was unusual and therefore special. You watch the light play on the water's surface, the ripples spreading out from where your line enters the stream. A dragonfly hovers nearby, its wings catching the sunlight, transforming into momentary jewels. Somewhere in the trees, a bird is singing, a melody so pure and clear that it seems to exist outside of time. You breathe deeply and feel the tension leaving your body, the constant low-level stress of medieval existence easing away for just this moment. Perhaps you catch a fish. Perhaps you do not. It almost does not matter. The catching is not really the point. The point is the sitting, the watching, the being present in a world that is beautiful and indifferent and endlessly fascinating. Medieval people did not have our language of mindfulness and meditation, but they understood intuitively what we are now trying to rediscover, that there is value in stillness, in attention, in the simple act of being alive in a particular place, at a particular time. Other quiet pleasures await you in the village itself. Perhaps you have a small garden behind your house, a plot of earth where you grow herbs and vegetables for your family's use. On days when there is time, you tend this garden not because you must, but because you want to. You weed and water and watch things grow. And there is a satisfaction in this work that is different from the satisfaction of your other labors. This is work you have chosen, work that belongs to you alone, work that connects you to the earth in an intimate and personal way. The garden is also a place of sensory pleasure. You crush a leaf of mint between your fingers and inhale its sharp, cool scent. You watch a bee moving from flower to flower, doing its ancient work. You feel the soil under your hands, cool and damp and somehow alive. These are small things, tiny experiences that would barely register in the constant stimulation of modern life. But for you, in your medieval existence, they are significant. They are moments of beauty in a life that does not always have room for beauty. Children understand these quiet pleasures instinctively. You watch the children of the village at play, and you see how they find joy in the simplest things. A stick becomes a sword, a puddle becomes an ocean, a pile of stones becomes a castle. They have none of the elaborate toys that modern children accumulate, yet they seem no less happy, perhaps happier. Their imaginations transform the ordinary world into something magical. And in doing so, they remind you of possibilities that adulthood tends to obscure. You remember your own childhood games, the hours spent playing with knucklebones, or chasing hoops, or building houses out of mud. You remember the intensity of that play, the complete absorption that made time disappear and the world shrank to just you and the game. You wonder when you lost that ability, when adulthood took it away, and you feel a gentle melancholy mixed with gratitude for the memories. Bathing is another quiet pleasure, though perhaps not as rare as we might think. The stereotype of medieval people as perpetually filthy is largely a myth. When weather permitted, you and your neighbors bathed in rivers and streams, enjoying the coolness of the water against your skin, the feeling of cleanliness that followed. Public bathhouses existed in larger towns, places where people gathered to soak and sweat and socialize. There was sensual pleasure in these baths, the warmth relaxing tired muscles, the water washing away the accumulated grime of hard work. You remember a day, last summer, when you bathed in the river with friends, splashing and laughing, the water sparkling under the bright sun. It was a simple pleasure, costing nothing, requiring nothing but willingness. And yet the memory of it warms you still, months later, as you sit by the fire on a cold evening and think about better days. These memories are a form of wealth that cannot be taxed or stolen, a treasury of joy that belongs to you alone. Whittling is another quiet pleasure that occupies idle hands on long evenings. You take a piece of wood and a small knife, and you begin to shape, not with any particular goal in mind, but simply for the pleasure of making. Perhaps a figure emerges, a crude animal or a simple toy. Perhaps the wood resists your intentions and becomes something else entirely. Either way, there is satisfaction in the doing, in the transformation of raw material into something shaped by human will and skill. The evening fire is a pleasure in itself, a gathering point for family on ordinary nights. You sit close to its warmth, watching the flames dance, listening to the wood crackle and pop. Conversations happen here, stories are told, plans are made. But there are also long stretches of comfortable silence, of simply being together without the need for words. This is the quietest pleasure of all, perhaps the pleasure of company, of knowing you are not alone in the world. You think about the Lord in his castle, with his tapestries and his silver and his endless supply of meat and wine. You wonder if he knows these quiet pleasures, if his wealth allows him to experience them, or if it somehow blocks them out. You suspect that there are things you have that he cannot buy, moments of peace and satisfaction that belong only to those who have known their absence. You do not envy him, not really. Not when the evening fire is warm and your family is near, and the world outside is dark but not threatening. Rest itself is a pleasure. When you have earned it, you lie down on your straw mattress, feeling your tired muscles relax, letting the weight of the day slip away. The darkness is complete, not the partial darkness of modern nights with their streetlights and glowing screens, but true darkness, thick and soft and enveloping. And in that darkness, you feel yourself begin to drift, consciousness loosening its grip, the cares of the day dissolving into the greater peace of sleep. This is perhaps the most basic pleasure of all. This surrender to rest, this trust that you can let go and the world will still be there when you return. Medieval people worked hard, harder than most of us can imagine, and rest was not a luxury but a necessity. And yet within that necessity there was also pleasure, the deep animal satisfaction of a body that has been used and is now being restored. You feel it now, perhaps, as you listen to these words, as your own body relaxes and your own mind begins to drift. Rest is calling to you. It is time to answer. Love, courtship, and stolen moments, the heart's diversions, sometimes. In the midst of all this, the games, the feasts, the quiet afternoons, there was someone whose presence made everything brighter. Love did not wait for convenient moments in medieval life any more than it does today. It arrived unbidden, unwanted sometimes, disrupting the careful calculations of families and communities with its irrational, irresistible force. And it brought with it a particular kind of fun, the exhilarating, terrifying, wonderful game of courtship. You remember the first time you noticed someone across the crowded square. It was a festival day, much like this one, and you were watching the dancing when your eyes met theirs. Something happened in that moment, some silent communication that bypassed words entirely. Your heart beat faster, your cheeks flushed. You looked away, then looked back, unable to resist, and found them still watching you. The world seemed to narrow to just the two of you, the noise and bustle of the festival fading to a distant murmur. This is how it begins, this oldest of human games. A glance across a crowded room, a flutter in the chest, a sudden, urgent need to know more about this person who has somehow captured your attention. Medieval people experienced these feelings as intensely as we do, though they expressed them in different ways and navigated them within different constraints. Courtship in medieval villages was a complex dance, shaped by the expectations of family and community as much as by the desires of the individuals involved. Marriages were economic arrangements as much as romantic ones, alliances between families that could elevate or diminish social standing. Parents had strong opinions about who their children should marry, and those opinions carried weight. But within these constraints, young people found ways to pursue their own desires, to steal moments with the objects of their affection, to play the ancient game of attraction and pursuit. The festivals provided ideal opportunities for these stolen moments. In the press of the crowd, you might find yourself standing next to the person who occupied your thoughts. In the whirl of the dance, you might hold their hand, feel the warmth of their touch, meet their eyes with a look that said what words could not. After the dancing, you might contrive to walk home the same way, lingering on the path, talking of nothing in particular, while your hearts pounded with unspoken meaning. Love tokens were exchanged, small objects charged with significance far beyond their material value. A ribbon given to a young man might be worn close to his heart, a visible sign of favor that announced to the world that he was pursuing someone, that someone was being pursued. A carved wooden trinket might be given in return. Hours of careful work distilled into a small object that said, "Without words, I am thinking of you. I am making things for you. I am hoping you will accept me." Poetry and songs of love circulated even among those who could not read. You might hear a young man singing beneath a window, his voice carrying through the evening air, the words of love borrowed from some traveling minstrel, but the emotion entirely his own. The girl at the window might listen, hidden in the shadows, her heart answering the song. Even as propriety demanded, she remained silent and unseen. These serenades were part of the ritual of courtship, public declarations of private feeling that everyone understood and most remembered from their own youth. The church had its opinions about all this, of course. Lust was a sin, desire was dangerous, the body was a trap for the unwary soul. Priests preached against the excesses of love, warning young people to guard their virtue and their hearts. And yet, the church also sanctified marriage, recognized the legitimacy of physical love within its proper bounds, and performed the ceremonies that joined couples together for life. The tension between condemnation and acceptance ran through medieval attitudes toward love, creating a complicated landscape that young people had to navigate with care. But despite the warnings and the constraints, love found its way. It always does. In the back corners of feast halls, couples whispered together, their heads close, their words for each other alone. In the fields beyond the village, secret meetings took place, assignations arranged through knowing glances and intermediary friends. In the long twilight of summer evenings, hearts opened to each other, hopes were shared, futures were imagined together. You remember your own courtship, if that is the word for the breathless, uncertain, wonderful time when everything was possible and nothing was decided. You remember the joy of seeing that person across the square and knowing they were looking for you too. You remember the agony of waiting, of not knowing if your feelings were returned, of hoping and fearing in equal measure. You remember the first time your hands touched deliberately, not by accident. The first time you knew with certainty that you were loved in return. Have you ever wondered how love letters were written when most could not read? It is a beautiful thought to drift off with. Perhaps they were dictated to scribes, those few literate individuals who earned coins by putting others' feelings into words. Perhaps they were simple marks and symbols, codes that only the sender and receiver understood. Perhaps they were not written at all, but spoken aloud and memorized, passed from mouth to ear with all the weight of words that might be lost forever if not held tight. The illiteracy of medieval people did not diminish their capacity for love, only changed the forms through which it was expressed. The wedding, when it came, was its own kind of celebration. The whole village would gather to witness the union, to share in the feast that followed, to send the new couple off to their married life with blessings and ribald jokes and genuine good wishes. There would be dancing and eating and drinking, sometimes for days, a celebration of love sanctified and regularized, of desire channeled into the acceptable form of marriage. But love did not end with the wedding. It continued in the small moments of married life, in the glances exchanged across a crowded room, in the touches that said, "I am glad you are here," in the comfort of sleeping beside another person night after night. It continued in the children who arrived, physical manifestations of love made flesh, bonds that tied couples together even when romantic passion cooled. It continued in the quiet companionship of old age, to people who had weathered life together, looking back on decades of shared experience, and for those who did not marry, or did not marry the one they loved. There were still moments of tenderness, still connections that enriched life, even if they could not be publicly acknowledged. Forbidden love existed in medieval times, as it has in every era, and while it brought danger and sometimes tragedy, it also brought intensity and meaning that safer loves might lack. The poetry of the troubadours celebrated this forbidden love, gave it voice, made it a subject for art and contemplation. As you drift toward sleep, let yourself remember love. Let the warmth of connection fill you, the memory of hands held and glances exchanged and hearts opened. Whether you are currently in love, or remembering love's past, or hoping for love to come, let that feeling of possibility, of connection, of being seen and known and wanted wrap around you like a blanket. This is one of the greatest pleasures life offers, in any era, in any place. It is the heart's deepest diversion, the game we never tire of playing, the story we never tire of telling. The medieval villager who watched the dancing and felt their heart quicken was not so different from you. They hoped and feared and longed and celebrated just as you do. Their love was shaped by different constraints, expressed in different forms, but it was the same fundamental human experience. And in remembering this, we bridge the centuries, we reach across time to touch hands with those who came before. We recognize in them the same hearts that beat in our own chests, closing the echoes of laughter. And so the day you woke to that rare, bright festival morning begins to fade into evening. The sun has long since set, and the stars are appearing one by one in the vast dark sky above the village. The fires that lit the celebrations are burning low now, their flames reduced to embers that glow orange and red in the darkness. The sounds of the festival have quieted too, the drums and the pipes and the shouting crowds giving way to softer sounds, murmured conversations, the occasional laugh, the rustle of people making their way home through the dark streets. You stand for a moment at the edge of the square, taking it all in. The day has been long and full, packed with more experiences than a usual week might hold. You have played games and watched spectacles, danced until your legs ached, and eaten until your belly protested. You have listened to music and stories, talked with neighbors and strangers, felt the bonds of community wrapped around you like a warm cloak. And now, as the day ends, You feel a particular kind of tiredness that is also a kind of satisfaction. You have lived this day fully. You have extracted every drop of joy it had to offer. The village around you is settling into sleep. Candles are being extinguished. Doors are being closed. Families are gathering together in their small houses to rest before the demands of ordinary life resume tomorrow. You can hear, faintly, a mother singing to a child, a low lullaby that drifts through the night air like a blessing. You can hear a dog barking somewhere in the distance, answered by another. Their conversation meaningless to you, but clearly important to them. These are the sounds of a community at rest, of human life in its quietest, most intimate form. You begin to walk toward your own home, your steps slow and unhurried. There is no need to rush. The night is mild, the stars are bright, and you are reluctant to let the day end. So you walk, and as you walk, you think about what you have experienced, what you have learned, what you will remember when this festival is nothing more than a story you tell on cold winter nights. You think about the games you played, the dice and the bowling and the wild football match that left you breathless and laughing. You think about the skill involved, the strategy, the pure physical joy of competition. These games connected you to something ancient, you realize, something that stretches back far beyond the boundaries of your own village, your own time. Humans have always played. Humans will always play. It is part of what makes us who we are. You think about the music and the dancing, the way your body moved without conscious thought, following rhythms that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than memory. You think about the storyteller and her tales, the way she transported you to other times and places with nothing more than words. These arts, too, are ancient, as old as humanity itself, and they will continue long after you are gone, carrying forward the joy you felt tonight, 2 generations not yet born. You think about the food, the rare abundance that transformed a simple meal into a feast. You can still taste the honey cake on your tongue, still feel the warmth of the ale in your belly. In a world where hunger was always possible, always hovering at the edge of consciousness, these moments of plenty were sacred. They were proof that life could be good, that the universe was not only harsh and demanding, but also, sometimes, generous and kind. You think about the spectacles, the mystery play with its bright costumes and broad emotions, the fair with its wonders from far away. These brought the larger world into your small village, reminded you that beyond the horizon there were marvels you had never seen and might never see. And yet, somehow, knowing they existed was enough. It expanded your sense of possibility, gave your imagination room to roam. You think about the quiet pleasures to the moments between the loud ones, the stillness by the river, the satisfaction of your small garden, the deep rest at the end of a long day. These pleasures required nothing but attention, the willingness to notice and appreciate what was already there. Perhaps, you think, these were the sweetest pleasures of all. They were available every day, not just on festivals. If only you remembered to look for them, and you think about love, the person whose glance made your heart race, whose touch made the world seem brighter. This is the thread that runs through everything, you realize. Love of community, love of tradition, love of life itself. The festival was an expression of this love, a celebration of the bonds that held people together and made existence meaningful. Your home is close now. You can see the familiar shape of it in the darkness, the thatched roof, the low doorway, the small garden where herbs grow. It is not much, this home of yours. By the standards of the wealthy, it is nothing at all. But it is yours, and inside it are people you love, and that makes it precious beyond measure. You pause at the threshold, not quite ready to go inside. The night sky stretches above you, vast and star-filled, and you feel suddenly how small you are against the scale of the universe. You are one person, in one village, in one kingdom, in a world that is larger than you can imagine. Your life is brief, a candle flame that will flicker and go out, leaving no trace on the grand sweep of history. And yet, somehow, this thought does not make you sad. It makes you grateful. Grateful for this day, this festival, this moment of awareness. Grateful to be alive, to have experienced joy, to have known love and community and beauty. The medieval people who lived in villages like this one are gone now. Their laughter has faded into silence. Their songs have been forgotten. Their names have been lost to time. And yet something of them remains. It remains in the traditions we still observe, the festivals we still celebrate, the games we still play. It remains in our own need for joy, our own search for community, our own capacity for love. They are not so different from us, these ancestors of ours. They were human, as we are human. They lived and loved and laughed, as we live and love and laugh. And in remembering them, in imagining their lives with empathy and care, we honor them. We keep their memory alive. Thank you for spending this time with me, walking through this medieval festival, experiencing its pleasures and pains, its joys and sorrows. If this helped you rest, I would be grateful if you would share it with someone who might need a peaceful night. There are so many of us searching for calm in a chaotic world, searching for connection across the distances that separate us. Perhaps these stories can be a bridge, a way of reaching out across time and space to touch another human heart. Sleep well, dear listener. Let the images of the festival fade gently from your mind, like embers cooling in the hearth. Let the sounds of medieval music and laughter become softer and softer until they dissolve into the quiet of your own room. Let the feeling of community and joy settle into your heart, warming you as you drift toward sleep. The past will be here when you return. The stories will wait for you. The ancestors will continue their silent vigil, their laughter echoing in our memories, their lives reflected in our own. The festival is over. The day has ended, but the echoes remain. They remain in you, in me, in all of us who carry within us the capacity for joy, the need for play, the hunger for connection. This is the inheritance we have received from those who came before. This is the gift we will pass on to those who come after. It is a precious thing, this inheritance. It is the best of what it means to be human. Close your eyes now. Let your breathing slow. Feel the weight of your body sinking into rest. You have earned this peace. You have traveled far today, through centuries and villages, through games and feasts and stories. Now it is time to rest. Now it is time to sleep. And perhaps, in your dreams, you will visit that medieval village once more. Perhaps you will hear the drums and see the dancers and taste the honey cake. Perhaps you will feel the warmth of the fire and the press of the crowd and the joy of being alive on a festival day. Long ago, rest now. Dream now. The past is safe in memory. and the future can wait until tomorrow. For now, there is only this moment, this breath, this gentle slide into sleep. Good night, dear listener. Good night.